Well, hello. I am currently sitting in my car. So we're going to read chapter 12. I'm sitting in my car at the gym waiting for my friend to get here. So hopefully in the next, 12 minutes I can get through this chapter. Okay. Chapter 12. Hattie returned to the house, but I stayed outside. I watched her leave, hating her way of walking, a minced combined with a waddle. She stopped to pick up the flower and lifted it to her nose, posturing for me. I sat on a bench and stared down at the pebbled walk, and all the times I'd imagined the misery she could inflict on me, I'd never imagined this. I'd thought of injuries, and I'd imagined terrible embarrassment, but I'd never thought of this kind of hurt. Arita was in our room now, waiting to give me a lesson in Aorthian. I remained seated. I couldn't face her. Was there a way to stop being her friend without hurting her? I could pretend I had suddenly become mute so I wouldn't be able to talk to her, but in that circumstance, she'd be my friend as much as ever. I'd talk to her and we'd invent a sign language, which would be great fun, and that wouldn't be ending our friendship, so the curse wouldn't let me do it. Besides, a mistress would be sure to say, "Speak, Ella," and I would have to. I could announce I'd taken a vow of loneliness, but Arita would be hurt that I'd taken such a vow. If only Mother hadn't forbidden me to tell about the curse. But then again, explaining would be an act of friendship, which the curse also wouldn't allow. The bell rang, calling us to bed. I was late again, but tonight there was no Arita to joke with about our tardiness. Sorry, one second. In our room, she sat on my bed, completing a letter for writing mistress. "Where were you? I've been reviewing the imperative." "I'm tired," I said, not answering the question. Perhaps I did look tired or troubled because she didn't press me. She only patted my arm and said, "We can study imperatives tomorrow." In bed, I didn't want to sleep. I wanted to savor the last few hours I had before I had to hurt her. Sleep on, Arita. Be my friend for one more night. A long vigil lay ahead. I pulled out my magic book. It opened to a letter from Dame Olga to her daughters. What was my voice for Dame Olga? I don't remember. "My sweet daughters, your poor mother is desolate without you. I attended a cotillion last night at the palace. I wore my wine-colored taffeta gown and my ruby pendant, but it was for naught. The company was thin because King Gerald is away, although Prince Charmant was there. That charming man, Sir Peter, wasn't there either. I was desolate. I understand he is off travelling and becoming richer, I imagine. I wish him well and will be first to pay my respects on his return." 3 pages followed describing Dame Olga's social calendar and her wardrobe. In closing, she remembered she had daughters and was writing to them. "I hope both of you are eating well to keep up your strength. Olive, pray remember not to eat Madame Edith's flowers. If you were to sicken or die, I should be desolate. Hattie, I hope you have found a trustworthy servant to dress your hair. Madame E. promised it could be arranged. I expect the 2 of you are amazingly finished by now. But do not toil too hard, my dears. If you can sing and dance charmingly, eat daintily, and sew a little, you will be fine ladies, and I shall be proud of you. My sweets, the carriage has arrived. I am in my lemon silk calling gown, and I must fly. Your adoring mother, Dame Olga." Why was a trustworthy servant necessary to dress Hattie's hair? I compared the luxuriant tresses of Hattie and her mother with Olive's thin curls, and I remembered Hattie's attack on my hair after she smelled the bogweed. I laughed out loud. Hattie and Dame Olga wore wigs! "Thank you, Dame Olga. I hadn't expected to laugh tonight." I turned the page. On the versa was an illustration of a centaur colt, Apple, I was sure, nuzzling a young man, Char. The colt was beautiful. That's not what that says. The colt was a beauty. His hide was deep brown with a tan mane and an irregular tar star on his chest. Skinny and leggy, he was made for speed, although he was too young to bear a rider. Would he ever really be mine? On the right was a letter from Char to his father. "Dear Father, I hope this finds you safe and well. My mother and my sister and brothers are in good health as I am. Since I received instructions to join you, I've been filled with gratitude for your confidence in me. The knights you have chosen to follow me are stout fellows and bear the command of a stripling with good humor. My mother worries, but I tell her they will not let harm befall me. In truth, Father, I am so stirred up by the thought of my first military duty, even if it is only relieving the border troops, that I hardly hear my good mother. Who knows? Perhaps the ogres will raid and there will be a skirmish. I do not fear injury, only that I may not acquit myself well. Skirmish with ogres? How could there not be a danger? Char continued to describe how the visit of a trade delegation and a small ball that Dame Olga had attended, although he didn't mention what he had worn. Near the bottom of the page, my name appeared. I am training a centaur colt for a lass I know. Her mother was the late Lady Eleanor. I admire the daughter Ella, but she has gone to finishing school, where I fear she will be made less admirable. What do they teach in such places? Sewing and curtsying? It is a great distance to go to learn such paltry tricks. Would he stop liking me now that I was no longer clumsy? I'd never enjoyed being a small elephant and hadn't mourned the loss till now. Would he even be alive to stop liking me, or would he be an ogre's lunch? The next page was a letter from Father to his bailiff. Dear James, the post-coach comes rarely to the Elves' Forest, but it came today. I am still with the Greenies. The trade has been disappointing. They have not so much as showed me an England, no matter what I bring out to tempt them. Their chief trader, Slannon, knows little about bargaining. He gave me 3 vases in exchange for a gnomish copper stew pot, and the same for a simple wooden flute. Below were 3 pages of trades and sales. He closed with his intentions. I am making for Laxie's farm. You may remember Uaxie, the giantess, who entrusted her turnip harvest to me last year. On October 15th, she will marry off her daughter, and I shall be there. I should like to see a giant's wedding. The ritual is said to be peculiar. Moreover, several fairies are likely to be present. They say hardly a wedding or birth takes place without at least one in attendance. If I can persuade a few to reveal themselves, I may be able to pick up some fairy-made trifles. I swallowed. My mouth had gone dry. Mandy had never told me that fairies liked to go to weddings and births, but she and Lucinda had both been present when I was born. Perhaps Lucinda would go to the Giants. It was the first time I'd ever known a definite place where she might be, where I might be too, if I could get there. She might even be in a generous frame of mind, especially if she had just cast a well-meant horrible spell. Perhaps she'd be so pleased that she'd release me from mine if I begged her to. I'd promised Father I would stay at finishing school, only that I would go. That's not what that says. I hadn't promised Father I would stay at finishing school, only that I would go. I could leave whenever I wanted, and by leaving, I'd never have to take another order from Hattie. Arita would still think I was her friend, and if I succeeded with Lucinda, I still could be. How late was it? How much of the night was left for travel? I stood up, then sat down again. How far was Uaxie's farm? The wedding was less than 2 weeks off. Could I get there in time? Frantically, I rifled the pages of my book, hoping to be vouchsafed a map. There. But it was the same one I'd looked at in the carriage on the way to finishing school. A frell. And no use to me now. No matter. I'd get directions somehow. In 5 minutes, my carpet bag was packed with a few essentials. Tonic, my magic book, my dictionary, a shawl, and little else. After a long look at Arita's sleeping form, I left. I paused before the door to the daisy room, then went in. With quiet steps, I approached Hattie's bed. She frowned in her sleep and mumbled. I understood only one word. Royal. Her wig was askew. Neat-fingered as I had become, I was able to lift it off without waking her. Now what to do with it? If I threw it into the dying fire, the smell might wake someone. I could drape it over the head of a china cat that adorned the mantel, but if Hattie woke early, she could rescue it before anyone saw. So I took it with me as a trophy. Yeah, so I don't really have much to say on this chapter, so that's pretty much it. I mean, Ella is leaving, finishing school, and this is the first time we've actually heard of Slannon, which is not quite what we have in the book, or in the movie. Okay, so it is currently 10:18 at night. I am at the Salt Lake Airport. My flight coming to Ohio for Thanksgiving leaves in about an hour, so we have some time. So you will probably be hearing background noises from the the airport, but I found a relatively quiet gate where there's no one. So here we go. Chapter 13. I slipped through the sleeping house as silently as a needle through lace. Outside, I waved farewell to the sleeping topiary. The person had a cat. Anyway, as I walked, the sky lightened. On the edge of Jen, I gave a baker the first sale of the day, 2 currant muffins and 2 loaves of traveler's bread in exchange for Hattie's wig, which he declared the finest he'd ever seen. He'd never heard of Uaxie, but said there were several giant farms up north. I hear they bake cookies as wide as my waist, he said. He drew a map for me in flour on his pastry board. The road would fork after I left Jen. The right-hand fork led back to Frel. I'm sorry, you're going to hear that in the background from the suitcases. Which I swear there were like none. And then all of a sudden, right when I started recording, everyone and their mother. Okay. The left fork was the one I wanted. My first landmark would be the Elves' Forest. For the forest, I would come to another fork. Then, road to the left, which I was not to take, led to the fens, where the ogres lived. The road on the right would take me to the giants. When the cows became as big as barns, I would be there. It didn't seem far on the pastry board. My fingers could travel the distance in a trice. The baker thought the trip would take 5 or 6 days by coach. How long do you think it would take to walk? Walking? He started to laugh. On foot? Alone? With ogres and bandits roaming the road? Beyond Jen, I left the road following it, but too far away to be seen from it. I didn't fear pursuit by Madame Edith, who would probably conceal my disappearance for as long as possible in hopes I might return. The baker's worries about ogres and bandits I thought exaggerated, since a solitary traveler would hardly be worthwhile prey. However, I was wary of strangers. With my curse, I had to be. I wondered if I would meet Char on his way to the fens. I liked thinking he might be near, but whether he was ahead of me or behind, or whether he had taken this route at all, I had no idea, and I wished my magic book had told me more. The road was little trafficked, and I was too happy about my escape to feel much fear. I was free of orders. If I wanted to eat my breakfast under a maple tree and watch the day grow between its leaves, I could, and I did. If I wanted to skip or hop or run and slide on dewy wet leaves, I could, and did. And when the mood took me, I whistled or recited poems that I made up on the spot. I spent 2 glorious days this way, the best since before Mother had died. I saw deer and hares, and once, at twilight, I swear I saw a phoenix rise, trailing smoke. On the 3rd day, I began to despair about reaching the giants in time. I hadn't even come close to the Elves' Forest. If I had any chance of getting to the wedding, I should have passed the forest on the 2nd day, unless the baker had been mistaken about the distance. Gotta turn the page. From the forest to the giants. Perhaps they were much closer to each other than he thought. On the 4th day, I finished my last bit of traveler's bread. The land changed to sandy fields and low scrub, and I began to despair about reaching the giants before the newlyweds celebrated their 1st anniversary. On the 5th day, I knew I was doomed to wander in endless barrens till I died. On the 6th day, there were more trees, which I was too dazed by hunger to realize their significance. I was searching the ground for the lacy flowers of the wild carrot when I caught a shift in the shadows ahead of me, a flash of motion among the tree trunks. A deer? A walking bush? There, I saw it again. An elf! Kamakumzab, I called. It meant sun and rain, or hello in Elfin. An elf woman approached me hesitantly. Her robe was woven in a dappled pattern, the shadow of leaves on the forest floor. Speak Elfin? Yugar. A little. I tried to smile at her, but her expression was so solemn I couldn't. Ful? She asked. Dokach Ella? Dokach Sir Peter Ukfrel? I wondered if she knew father. Sir Peter Watlyen? Her tone was dismissive. She stepped closer and stared at me. I met her gaze and hoped I didn't seem Watlin or sly, too. Her eyes poured into me. I was sure she knew every one of my unkind thoughts, knew about the theft of Hattie's wig, knew each time I'd made my finishing school mistresses uncomfortable, and knew I hadn't had a bath since I'd left Jen. Mudlen, she smiled and took my hand. Her fingers felt waxy like a leaf. Not like father. She led me to Slannon, the elves' chief trader, who spoke Kieran fluently. He was the one father had mentioned in his letter. He confirmed that the baker's map was accurate. I didn't say anything, but my face must have shown how bitter my disappointment was. You will join your father at the giant's farm? He asked. I nodded. But I'm not hurrying to him, I blurted, then stopped. You seek something else from the giants. His amber eyes searched my face. Someone I must find. I must find her. Slannon patted my arm. Elves will help. In the morning you will see, but you must spend the night as our guest. He smiled, showing pale green teeth. I smiled back, reassured, although one wouldn't expect green teeth to be reassuring. The elves were the same height as humans, with their mossy hair and green skin tinged with orange for the coming autumn. They were no more frightening than the pumpkin vine. And now, please join us for our evening meal. We sat at a table with 12 elves, who knew only a little Kieran, but with my bit of elfin and gestures and laughter, we cobbled together a language understood by all. I have to turn the page. Their supper was more drink than meal. The appetizer was lemon parsnip soup, followed by turtle barley soup, the main course, succeeded by a soup of chopped raw green vegetables, the salad course. Dessert was a fruit soup. It was all delicious, even though my jaw whistled for something to chew on. When we finished eating, Slannon said that elves like to sleep soon after nightfall. He led me to my sleeping place. We passed the elves' nursery, where clusters of small hammocks hung from trees like bunches of grapes. 2 adult elves, one with a flute and one singing, threaded their way through, the singer occasionally rocking a group of hammocks gently. When we reached the oak from which my hammock hung, I asked for a lantern to read by. What book is better than sleep when the sun goes down? Slannon asked, calling for a light. I had been afraid to show Mandy's present to anyone since Hattie had taken Mother's necklace, but now I produced it from my carpet bag. Slannon opened it. The Shoemaker and the Elves returned as the first story. He roared with laughter. We're so tiny in here, the elves can fit inside a shoe. He looked through the rest of the book, admiring the illustrations and reading parts of different stories. Then he turned back to The Shoemaker and the Elves, but it was gone. In its place was a story about a walrus and a camel. Fairy maid, he cried. This is precious. It must give you much comfort. He returned it to me. Do not read too late. You have a long journey tomorrow. After 2 stories, I blew out my light. The night was clear. My ceiling was sky and an eyelash of a moon. By shifting from side to side, I made my hammock swing me into sleep. In the morning, Slannon asked me to show my book to the other elves. To them, it was written in Elfin. They were enchanted and might have read all day, except that Slannon stopped them. You have given us much pleasure, he said, and now we'd like to show you something wonderful too. He lifted several packages onto the table he used to display goods for trading. Then he began to remove their oak leaf wrappings. Are these by Agulin? Agulin? I asked when a bit of pottery emerged. You've heard of him? Slannon said, sounding pleased. Yes, he made them. A nut dish was unwrapped first, modeled in the shape of a centaur. It rested on the table, but was in motion nonetheless. More than in motion, the centaur was motion. His head thrust into the wind, his arms hugged his forearms, his mane and tail streamed back, and without moving, such was Agulin's skill, his legs beat the ground. Next came a dragon-shaped coal scuttle that glowed gold and orange. Somehow, the air shimmered around its foot-long flame. Its ruby eyes were windows to an interior furnace. I was afraid to touch the beast for fear of being scorched. But my favorite was a stirrup cup molded in the shape of a wolf's head and shoulders, with the head lifted and the mouth pointed into an O for a long howl. The ridges in the pottery for his fur were so fine that each hair was defined. I felt the tension in his shoulders where the cup ended, and I imagined the rest of him sitting but erect, with excitement running through him for his big paws to the end of his pluming tail. I loved this howl. I loved his howl, which I could both hear and feel. Long and plaintive, woebegone and heartsore, filled with yearning for what used to be or for what would never come again. He's beautiful. They're all beautiful. They don't look as though someone made them. They look born. Slannon began to wrap the pieces up again. I hated to let them go. Wrap this one last, please. I touched the wolf's nose. When he finished, Slannon handed the package with the wolf to me. It's for you. Father had made clear that an Agulin was worth a great deal. I can't accept such a valuable gift, I said in my best manners mistress manner, but my hands closed around it. You have, he said, smiling. We like to give our best pieces away sometimes when we find people who love them. Thank you. Don't cry. Slannon gave me a green handkerchief. 1 second. I won't leave my luggage unattended. Okay. I don't know. Can you hear her? I think you can. Okay, cool. Don't cry. Santa gave me a green handkerchief. He looked at me consideringly. Sir Peter is a witty man and a shrewd trader, but if he had admired our things as you do, we would have been gladder to let him have them. But he told me that you were the best potters. He should have told us. How can I exchange this gnomish copper stew pot for two such paltry vases, he'd say. The workmanship doesn't compare, he'd say. And father had thought Slannon a poor trader. My gift was packed on a fat pony along with enough food to last until I reached my destination. More elvish generosity, although the pony was alone. Ib o plas wadu, Slannon said in parting. Stay in the shade. With any luck, you'll reach the giants in 3 or 4 days. But I had no luck. This chapter I find interesting because Slannon, like, this is, I'm pretty sure, like, his only role in the book is, like, he gives her this, like, really well-crafted, like, cup of a wolf and, like, sends her on her way to the giants to find Lucinda, but that's about it. But, like, in the movie, he's, like, probably, like, the second or third most prominent character, which I find very interesting, that, like, they played him up to be such a much bigger character in the book than in the movie.